Hello, welcome back to I Say Our Wrong Reads, and today I'm going to be chatting about some of my favourite book series. So I have read for quite a wee while, and I have amassed some of my favourite book series. I think I've got 5, including one special mention that I'm going to be talking about today. Some of these are favourites from my childhood and my teenage years to ones that I still really enjoy to read today and would highly recommend to anyone. So, first up, I have the Alex Schreider series by Anthony Horowitz. So, Anthony Horowitz was one of my favourite authors when I was younger. I used to read everything that he put out, and I even really enjoy his Sherlock Holmes stories that he did, The House of Silk in particular. Um, and these stories were probably my first glimpse into him as an author. So, Anthony Horowitz was essentially a series about a teenage boy from England who was recruited by MI6 after his uncle was killed. And he becomes a spy for them and goes across the world doing top secret missions. These top secret missions included the first one, which he had to pose as another schoolboy to go and visit a guy that was creating a new computer and was going to give one to every student in the country, and turns out he was evil. Shock, I know. And he had to stop them. And there's lots of very dramatic chase scenes and shark tanks and evil villains and fights and stuff like that, and it's great fun and perfect for just speeding through in one go. I actually reread these last year because I was wanting to see if they actually held up, and they surprisingly do. They're very enjoyable to get through, and I would highly recommend checking these out if you want some light, well, not light, but like enjoyable children's or teenage fiction. So my favourite in this series has to be number 2 with Point Blank, where Alex is sent to a school in the Alps because strange things have been happening to students who go there and then come back home. They don't seem to be the same as when they left. And then hilarity, well, not hilarity, but like insanity ensues, and he's stuck in this creepy boarding school on the Swiss and the French Alps, and he can't get out. And there's a whole chase scene where he goes down the hill. It's great fun. This is one of my favourite. And I also really like Archangel, which has a lot of, which is set in an island, a warm island down the Pacific, I think. And essentially a billionaire is wanting to launch nuclear weapons and he has to stop them. And they're taken with a pinch of salt, but they're very enjoyable once you get into them, and I would highly recommend them. Next up is another series that I read when I was very young. Can't remember, I think it must have been 2010 when I first got this book series from the works. And I absolutely devoured them. I loved them. And the last 5 of these books were bought when they came out. So there's 15 books of these in total, and this includes the Morganville Vampire series. So the Morganville Vampire series was probably my first, before Twilight became a thing, before I actually, because I never actually properly read Twilight. I did watch the films, but these were the books that I was obsessed with. So it's essentially a 16-year-old physicist student called Claire goes to university in Texas in a town called Morganville and realises things are not quite what they seem. And the book series is essentially her chronicling what's happening in this town where vampires exist and are controlling everything. And it's great fun. There's a lot of very vivid characters, especially in particular book 3, which I will talk about in a minute, and just carrying it on in the plot, and it's just great fun. I actually haven't read these in a wee while, so I don't know if they stand up as much as they did when I first got into them, but I might do, I don't know, a 24-hour reading challenge where I try and get through as many as physically possible and see how that goes later in the fact. So the 4 main characters of this book is Claire. She moves in at the start of this one to what's called the Glass House with 3 other people, Michael Glass, Eve Rosser, and Shane. I can't actually remember his last name. He was my least favourite of the 4. But something's up with Michael and it's all a bit strange, and then they start to realise that the town's full of vampires and she doesn't know what to do, and it's essentially that. My favourite book in the series has to be Midnight Alley, where Claire is, this is the third book, where Claire is introduced to her teacher or mentor that she's going to be working with, who's a vampire. He's Welsh and called Mernon, and he's absolutely insane, and he's a physicist and dabbles in magic, and I absolutely love him. He's such a good character, and he has bunny slippers with fangs and keeps a big massive pet spider. So yeah, I love this one. And then my second favourite one is The Feast of Fools, and this is essentially a big bad comes to town and they have to try and band together to stop him while going to a big fancy dress party in big flowing outfits. So this was also great fun. Next up are three that I still reread and listen to and watch again and again and again, even now, and I think probably haven't gone too long without reading a version of these. And the first of these is the St Mary's Time Travelling series by Jodi Taylor, the first one being Just One Damn Thing After Another. And these books are essentially chronicling main character Max, who is a historian, and essentially her travels through space, I'm thinking about Doctor Who. Essentially chronicling her travels through time as she documents history as it's happening. So she takes pictures and finds out what's really happened to big mysteries and that sort of thing. And it's essentially like a ragtag team of these people going back in time, causing problems and creating havoc and that kind of thing. So as it stands just now, I think there's 11 books out, but there's no sign of stopping. There's also 2 short story collections, the long and the short of it and long story short, already out. There is definitely some things, the writing is a bit fast paced and there's not really much, it just keeps going one after the other. So if that's not really the kind of fast pace, never really slowing down kind of stuff's not your speed, then you might not like this. These definitely are probably an acquired taste, but once you get into them they're really really addictive and you can easily fire through one every day. At least I could when I first got them because I was obsessed at the time. So yep, my favourite one has got to be Trail Through Time, where they're essentially being chased by the police throughout time, and she keeps having to avoid dodgy situations by going to places which are on the danger of being, which are right on the danger of being like extinct or put in danger, to try and throw these guys off her trail. And I really enjoyed this one because it showcased such a wide range of places and times where they're still keeping to the one plot, which especially the first one suffers from, because the first one there's like 3 plots happening in the one go. So the first plot is her getting used to it, and the second plot is something else, and the third plot, and then there's like a last chapter plot which makes no sense, and it's all in the one book. So definitely as the series progresses it gets a little bit more with its footing and kind of discovers what it really wants to be doing, and especially if you read them really close to each other they do kind of blend together and you're not entirely sure what's going on. But this one definitely stood out to me, as did And the Rest is History, which the main bad guy from the first one comes back and tries to cause problem, and I really liked him as a villain. This really reminded me of Timeless, the TV show. So if you like Timeless, then you might like this, right? Next up is my second favourite series of all time, and it is the Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. So I read these books years and years and years ago, and I keep coming back to them and keep coming back to them. And I love both the film and the TV series. I think the TV series is definitely better, but the movie has Billy Connolly and Meryl Streep in it, so I love that one too. So if you don't know what the Series of Unfortunate Events are, it's essentially about the both, I can't pronounce their name, they're triplets who lost their parents in a fire, and it's essentially them being shuffled around to various guardians to look after them, while the evil Count Olaf is trying to steal all their money and then eventually try and kill them. That kind of thing. I think this is a very, very solid series all the way through, and although there are a couple in like the later ones, like 9, 10, that are kind of less memorable to me, it definitely picks up around 12, 13. So I've got two favourite books for this series, and the first one is the second one, The Reptile Room. This one was my favourite because I loved Billy Connolly as the as in the movie. So my favourite book in this series is probably, well, I've got two joint favourites to be fair, and the first one would probably be The Reptile Room, which is the second one in the series. So the Reptile Room is essentially they go to their Uncle Monty's house and Count Olaf follows them, but they start to learn more about the mystery that actually killed their parents in the first place. And the reason that I love this one so much is because of how much I really loved Billy Connolly as Monty in the film. It was probably my favourite casting in that entire film. And don't get me wrong, I like the TV series casting just as much. I think he's absolutely brilliant in the role, but Billy Connolly takes the cake from me. He was absolutely brilliant, and whenever I read this one now, I automatically think about him as Uncle Monty, and it just makes things so much better. Just his snark, his sarcasm, the absolute unhingedness of Monty at times fits Connolly so well that it just makes this one so much better. And then my second favourite has got to be The End. This is the 13th book in the series and the last one, as can be told from the end. I thought it was one of the last books in a series that really brought everything together and really made it perfect for what the series was to start with. It really was a good way of summing up everything, bringing all the plot lines together, ending the series on a way that fit the tone of the rest of the books. So obviously these books weren't exactly happy books, so the tone fit that, and I know a lot of people were disappointed that they didn't get a happier ending, but I felt that the ending was absolutely perfect, the way it ended with the kind of uncertainty and unknowing and just being able to take a guess and go and make an effort to try and make things better, without knowing how it will turn out, was kind of a perfect way of doing that, and I really liked it. So my favourite book series of all time, which will be no surprise to anybody that actually knows me, and that is the Northern Lights, or the His Dark Materials series by Philip Pullman. So the His Dark Materials series follows Lyra Belacqua, who is a young woman or young girl from a parallel universe, where your soul is manifested in the form of a demon, so an animal that can change shape when you're a child and then becomes one animal when you're older. So it's essentially the story of her trying to find her best friend Roger, who has disappeared, and where it takes her. So this is the first one, Northern Lights. I would probably recommend remember it if you've seen the film, for the one that's got the big polar bear that likes to fight things and with a compass, which is why this is sometimes called the Golden Compass in America, whereas here it was called the Northern Lights. So this was a really good, very, very good, solid start to a series which is honestly my favourite series of all time. It's just so beautifully written and in a way that perfectly captures the characters and the absolute mystique of this universe in a way. My favourite character in this one is definitely Lee Scoresby, and Hester, his demon, who's a little hare, and I absolutely love her. And he is my favourite character in the first two ones, only usurped because of a better one, but we'll talk about that later. And yeah, I would highly recommend these books to anyone that wants to. And then the second one follows Will, who lives in our world, and it's essentially his father went missing in the North Pole, or away in Canada somewhere, and his mum is needing looked after. So essentially he goes and he's being looked for police. And so essentially he leaves her with a friend to try and find out what happened to his dad and get help for his mum. And then Lyra and Will meet up and essentially combine their quests together to figure out what's going on and find Will's dad. And then the third book, which is definitely my favourite of the three, is the Amber Spyglass. So the Amber Spyglass has the best character in this series for me, and that is Mary. Mary is an astrophysicist who researches dark matter, and essentially what that has to do with the plot of the book. So I don't want to go into it and spoil it too much, but Mary essentially was a nun who stopped believing in God and decided to look in science instead, specifically astrophysics and dark matter. And I honestly think that this had some impact on me because my master's project was looking into the cosmological probes of dark matter and I study astrophysics, so I definitely think that this had a severe impact on me as a kid, and I still absolutely love it today. And I just think this is an absolutely beautiful book, perfectly written, and it's definitely probably my favourite of all time of this series. So just before we go, I wanted to have my special mention book, and that was Terry Pratchett's The Discworld series. So I actually haven't read too many of Terry Pratchett's series. I've only read a couple here and there, but my favourite ones that I have read so far are the Terry Pratchett's version of Death, so Mort and now Hogfather. Hogfather is probably my favourite one that I've read so far. I just love it, and I definitely will be reading more in the future, so keep an eye out for that. Yep. Thank you for listening to some of my favourite books series. If you have any thoughts on the books that I talked about today, leave a comment down below. And I have started trying to film in a new location, so let me know what you think of that, if it was good or if it was bad, if you could hear me all right. And thank you for listening. See you later. Bye bye.